Hello, welcome to Three Channels Simultaneously. This is Conversations in Calvinism on Turd and Fans channel. We're also streaming to the Society for Evangelical Armenians YouTube channel, as well as the Twitchy Theologian with Jerry. And we are very fortunate and happy to have Jerry here with us today. And this is a review of the debate that was had with Jeremiah Nortier and Dr. White, and my on one side defending limited atonement, and myself and Dr. Farris, Dr. Joshua Farris, defending unlimited atonement. So this is a follow-up on that. But before we get to all that, for starters, Jerry, well, for starters, Turton fan, hey, good to see you as always, my brother. And then Jerry, it's great to have you on the program and have a chance to talk with you. But for starters, could you just, for those that don't know you yet, could you tell us a little about yourself and your church background?
Yeah, for sure. First, I want to say thank you guys for having me on. Territon fans had me on before. Dan, I've seen you on here quite a bit, and you've earned my respect tremendously just watching you interact with people and seeing the content that you put out and the intellectual depth that you convey. But anyways, I'm Jerry Duckworth. I run the Twitchy Theologian YouTube channel. I'm a member at Faith Presbyterian Church, about to be an intern there here soon. And, I love debating. I love talking about Mormonism, and the Mormons love fighting me back, and so do the provisionists and everyone else.
Well, welcome. Absolutely welcome. Yeah. Thank you for joining. Yeah. So Turd fan, what did you think overall on the debate?
Well, it did not disappoint in terms of that I feel personally connected. I'm friends with you, of course, and friends with Dr. White. So two of my good friends debating is just for maybe a unique opportunity for me to enjoy a debate and a clash of folks who are excellent at debate and very scripture oriented. I wasn't as familiar with Pastor Nortier and with Dr. Farris, but so I didn't have huge expectations going in, and overall, I thought it was a useful debate. I wasn't a huge fan, as I've kind of discussed a lot at length yesterday. Wasn't a huge fan of Dr. Farris's opening argument because I didn't feel like it was. Well, there's lots of reasons, and I spent 3 hours talking about it yesterday. But I wasn't a big fan of that. But I thought that the debate overall was useful, and it felt like there were a few key points that came out of the debate that would be great for our discussion. And while I'm mentioning discussion, thanks for having me on your channel. And also, Jerry, thanks for having me on your channel today, as we're all kind of streaming to each other's channel. I believe that the comments from all three channels show up in the StreamYard. So feel free, whichever channel you're on, your comments won't be unnoticed. So
The angry provisionists will be the ones commenting on my channel.
Yeah, if you need to ban evade, just go to one of the other channels. So
That's right. Just come to SEA. Yeah.
There you
go. That's funny. No, I hear you. I guess so certainly Dr. Farris and I have different approaches, but I appreciated him and his approach quite a bit. I mean, I like the fact that he balances me out, and that it's not just like, a copy paste of what I do or something like that, because he's got a totally different approach and orientation. So for the most part, we divided up the labor in terms of the, kind of the big picture atonement model and framing of the issue, and then which Dr. Farris took on, and then me kind of like in the weeds, or maybe in the roots of the weeds, or maybe in the scintilla on the roots of the weeds, looking at the details. So, from a top down, bottom up approach, I thought we had good coverage. I understand that, well, for me, it's helpful to look at things from different perspectives and different approaches and that sort of thing. So, it gives a well-rounded and well-oriented view. It's vitally important. I mean, I felt like if Dr. Farris's framing and approach and categories is correct, then to some extent, the arguments that were presented on the other side just missed the point. But that's a big if in terms of is his framing correct. So, I mean, that might not be a bad place to start. I have some pieces queued up, but it's up to you guys. But before we do that, Jerry, what was your overall impression of the debate?
I really enjoyed it. I know the apologetic dog pretty well. He's been on my channel before, Jeremiah. And then I call myself Family Dollar James White. So I mean, I got mad love for him. Got mad love for you because I've seen you on here so much, and just when you guys go over history, I'm like, man, I'm learning so much. And I didn't know Joshua Farris. But I appreciated, his scholarly approach. There was a few things that I think if I was going to say a critique would be like, I felt like he shouldn't have called it the Whiteian view, because that rhetoric immediately upset some Reformed guys. And like, if you're trying to reach them, we want to use different rhetoric. But other than that, that would be just a small minor critique. But overall, thought it was well. I thought both sides presented really good arguments, and there were times where I heard you lay out an argument or you were cross-examining. I can't remember who it was, and I was like, wow, he's really hammering that point home there. That's good. And then I would hear Jeremiah do the same thing, especially in the first cross-examination. Overall, I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Yeah, that's good feedback overall. And I think we can always improve, and I think we should be open to that. So,
can I ask a question?
Please.
What? Just curious. Were you nervous at all? Because I would have been nervous as could be.
I was probably more nervous for this debate than I've ever been. I might have been more prepared for this debate than I've ever been, but at the same time, once Dr. White starts cross-examining you, I mean, I don't care who you are. That's intimidating. That is seriously intimidating. But in him and Jeremiah are excellent debaters. And like I'll say, for example, on the John 12 exchange, I thought my points were solid, but I couldn't get them across. They were effective in their approach, and communicated them right. It's a lot easier to just jump on a channel and just walk through it yourself, but in a debate, oh my goodness, it's if you're trying to explain something while two sharks are simultaneously chewing off your right and left leg, it's really difficult.
Well, I think that's actually one of the points where I was like, wow, he's doing a really good job in cross-examination there, because you were asking the questions and I understood the point that you were getting to. So it came across. You did a good job of getting it across despite their throwing up the shield and buckler,
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I hope it was helpful for anyone that would have had an opportunity to watch, and I certainly encourage everyone to check it out. So where do we want to start? I mean, we can start with this sufficiency argument if you'd like, but I'll leave that to you guys if that's where you want to start.
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, you could whatever if there's some particular point that you would want most of all to make sure we get to, maybe we should start with that one, because I know that we could go on the sufficiency one for the remainder of the time. But if the sufficiency one is actually the most important argument anyway, then let's start with that one.
Oh, well, I guess I'll consider it. Hopefully we won't spend the whole time on it, but we can. But yeah, let's start there because I thought it was pretty important. So here, let me see if I can add this to the screen. Okay, so this is my handy debate flowchart. So what you got is the speeches that going across. So Farris spoke first in the first affirmative construction, and then White, and then I went, and so on. So the exchange happened pretty early on in the debate. So what happened is Farris covered it in his first affirmative constructive, and he basically argued Christ's sufficient atonement is the basis of the genuine offer of the gospel. And then he criticized, argued against White's view, saying White's view reduces the atonement's sufficiency. He treats sufficiency as theoretical rather than real. And I have clips, so we'll actually get to see these in a second here. And then in cross-examination, after White spoke, and I don't think White directly addressed it in his speech, at least not that I caught. But after that, Dr. Farris asked Dr. White specifically, do you deny the traditional view of sufficiency for all? And we'll see Dr. White's response. And then basically I reinforced, Farris had used the Lombardian formula in his opening. So I reinforced the Lombardian formula. And then I argued that the for and sufficient for all either refers to intention or result. And White's argument is that it could have been sufficient, but it's not actually sufficient. And I gave the example of the French fries. And then I don't have anything further. So as far as I could tell, it didn't really come back up in the debate. And so that's where the debate on that point ended within the framework of the debate itself. So do you guys, where do you want me to start? Do you want to listen to the initial argument? Do you want to listen to the criticism of Dr. White's view? Do you want to start with the cross-ex, or do you want the French fries example?
So there is one other place that it came up, which was in the audience question section, and I have that one queued up.
Okay.
But we can wait on that one. The other thing is, I just wanted to highlight something I didn't care for in this debate is there wasn't any, formally at least, there wasn't any rebuttal. So it's kind of the lack of the unlimited side bringing up an argument and then repeating the argument, but not really getting that argument directly addressed, is a sort of unsurprising result of having only constructive speeches and a conclusion. And the conclusion is very short relative to the total length of the two speeches. So I don't know how much of the cross-examination was targeted at this particular point. You do point out there is at least one place where although Dr. White doesn't seem to have made the argument about that subject, nevertheless, there's some cross-examination on question related to that subject. So at least somehow there is some clash going on there. It's just, for me, that's not a very satisfying debate format. But hey, I'd much rather have a debate with a format I don't love than no debate. So I hate to kind of like criticize it, because I want, somebody might be discouraged and say, oh, let's not have these debates, since this is not perfect in every respect.
Yeah, I get that. I prefer rebuttals too, but at the same time, I'm okay with it. And I basically split my speech in between rebuttal and reinforcing the affirmative, anyways. So, but it's not enough. But it's never enough. I mean, I could have gone for hours and hours and hours. That's for sure. Okay, so I'm still wondering where you guys want to start.
I guess chronological order makes sense.
Okay, let's do that. All right. Let's see. And there might be ads. Let's see.
Yo, I'm just humbled right now. You got the flow chart and everything. Or the spreadsheet. Like, he got a spreadsheet, and I'm over here like I'm just the comic relief.
No, not at all. Not at all. All right.
I'm going to unmute your screen in just a second when you tell me it's ready. Right now we're seeing your spreadsheet. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, here we go. So this is the first bit.
Objective impact on all people and a cosmic effect. Engaging with the historical tradition is not about mere academic interest, it's about faithfulness. As we stand on the shoulders of giants, interpreters as faithful as White, theology is not built by isolating proof text, but a much richer work. This understanding makes sense of the universal offer of grace, sufficiency. Christ's death is infinite in value. The universal offer, atonement for all, secures a genuine call. God's love motivates to all humanity, motivates the atoning work as a part of the broad redeemed narrative. The gospel sincerely offered to all arguably upholds the accountability to all. The ecclesial concern, atonement.
Okay, now let's jump to the next clip. And this is going to be where Dr. Farris comments on the other side, on Dr. White's view. And then we'll get to the Q&A. Okay, hopefully no ad. Okay. All right, we back. Here's the second part. You ready?
Problem, though, White's view actually diminishes the value of Christ's atonement, not in Christ's infinitely valuable divine human nature, but in the actual event's extrinsic worth to all humanity. That's where White's framework collapses. Definite atonement, as he presents it, narrows the scope of Christ's works to a precise transactional exchange for the elect, making it sufficient only in a limited sense, measured and quantified rather than actually sufficient for all. It's only modally or nodally or conceptually sufficient.
Okay, then we're going to get to the cross-examination, and let's get that clip queued up. Sorry for all the jumping around, but in between, the debate kind of goes to other topics and areas. So, okay, here we go. Ready?
The traditional view of the sufficiency of Christ's death on the cross.
Please define what you think the traditional view is.
Okay. Do you believe that Christ's death is sufficient for all?
Christ's death could redeem the entire universe, of course.
Do you affirm the traditional Lombardian formula regarding the sufficiency of Christ's death and the distinction to the efficacy of his death?
Well, I just said that there is no limitation to the sufficiency. There is no limitation to the power. The issue is the relationship of the person to whom the atonement is applied and the electing grace of God. So it is sufficient to save all. There's no limitation on the power, but it is only efficacious in harmony with God's electing grace and the placing of a person in Christ who is then regenerated by the Holy Spirit, the whole Trinity.
Do you affirm that Christ's death on the cross is extrinsically sufficient for all, or that the event itself has some definitive nature to it regarding all humankind?
I'm not sure what distinctions you're trying to make there.
It's a very important distinction to the church that has always read the atonement in this way. It is a distinction between the sufficiency of Christ as the divine one and the distinction to the actual event itself as having a real sufficiency for all humanity.
I reject the assumption that there is a universal church view on this. There have been.
Okay, and then and I see Turd Fan is ready, but let's play one last clip just to get the rounded picture, I guess, of what happened within the four corners of the debate itself, and then we can chit chat. There's an ad.
Sorry about that. People are getting the audio bled through there for a minute, guys, but
It's all right. I was jamming to it.
Okay, we're back.
Now let's get on to the actual case itself. Let's start with the framework. We, of course, hold and agree that Christ's death secures the salvation of believers. That's not the point of contention. And that was what Dr. Farris skillfully presented. The question is there another aspect of Christ's work, a second aspect, where he satisfies justice for all in the sense of there's a basis for the gospel proclamation for everybody. And in the sufficiency for all position, when we in the Lombardian formula, when it says that Christ's death is sufficient for all, think of the word for, right? The word for either means the intention that Christ's death be sufficient for the non-elect, or it is the causal result of Christ's death, that it's a provision for all. So that's what the sense of sufficiency is. And what I'm concerned in the answers that Dr. White gave, although they're certainly respectable, is that he is saying, well, it could have been. And the idea there is like, let's say I had the Hope Diamond, which is so valuable, but I take it to McDonald's and I trade it for fries for 10 people, right? But I actually transacted, let's say I write a contract and we sign it, and I've bought fries for 10 people. Yes, I could have traded that diamond for everyone in this room, but I didn't. I actually transacted it for 10 bags of fries for just 10 of you. And that's the sense of sufficiency, and that's why Dr. Farris is saying that Dr. White's position is a hypothetical sufficiency rather than an actual sufficiency.
Okay. And I can just remove this from the screen, and now let's chat.
What if the fries are there, but he only gives them the fries? Or like, well, I don't know. I guess that's not the right analogy. I would have to think about that more. Go ahead. Somebody smarter talk.
That would have to be Turd. That's definitely not me. That has to be Turd and Fan.
Well, so the to me the interesting point is this: the formula that says sufficient for all, efficient for the elect. That formula expressed at that level of abstraction is something that Calvinists are fine with by and large. I don't know if there's some subgroup of Calvinists that say, no, it's only sufficient for the elect. It's not sufficient for the reprobate in any sense. This would be somebody who has the mistaken idea, let's say, that Christ would have needed to shed a little bit more blood, another few drops of blood, if he wanted to save another person. And so a person who has that notion of the atonement, so that Christ, and it seems that Farris kind of caricatured the tulip view in this way, that somehow Christ needs to die more for more people, that if someone had such a view, then they would not align with this sufficient for all, efficient for the elect. They would say, oh, it's only sufficient for the elect, not sufficient for people beyond the elect. So in the fries analogy, well, if you take this rare diamond and it's worth, let's say that, let's simplify the analogy to being that you could buy fries for everyone in the store. Instead, you just buy fries for your family, not for everybody in the store. But the intrinsic value of the diamond is such that it's enough to buy all the fries in the store. Now, it's just the same. That's true whether the way that the transaction works is that you hand over the diamond and you say, give me the fries, 6 fries, and give it to those 6 people. Or if you say, I want all the fries in the restaurant, and then you only give them to the 6 people. Now, those are 2 different ways of structuring the transactions, but they're, in both cases, what is given, the diamond, is sufficient to feed the entire restaurant, even if it only is actually feeding the family members of the person who's offering the diamond. So,
well, let me jump on that. So what you said there about the second option where you buy all the fries, I think it really makes sense that you can offer fries to everyone in the restaurant. But if you only have 4 bags of fries, how can you offer it to hundreds of people?
Right. So if the nature of the atonement was that it's like buying fries, and if Christ only bought enough fries for the elect, then it would be, as I said, there might be some subgroup of Calvinists who view the atonement that way. It's not as far as I'm aware, it's not a kind of mainstream Calvinist view, but you could imagine Calvinists who hold such a view that Christ would have needed to die more for more people. But instead, the gospel offer is grounded because the blood is not, it's not like that. It's not like that he's created let's just use 144,000 as the number of the elect. So it's not that he has 144,000 drops of blood now, and there's only just one for each. It's that his blood could cover anyone that he applies it to.
Right, but okay, so Dr. Farris did say that, right? Like he basically said, um, he acknowledged that the 5-point Calvinist position is not limiting the value of Christ's personhood. It's rather the transactional nature of it. So what did he do with the infinite value of his personhood? What was his intention? What was the effect?
So
I think
there's go ahead.
I'm sorry. You first, Territon, thank you. You kind of was getting to what I was wanting to get at with the analogy. I was just like scared to draw it all the way out at the sound of sounding, or at the fear with the fear of sounding crazy. But I think that's the point, is the intent. I think that's the real clash there. What was the intent? Like if we're going with the fries analogy, the intent was to buy fries for your family, but the diamond bought enough fries literally for everyone in the store. So the way I look at it, and feel free to punch me in the mouth, Turton, is when Christ's death is of infinite value, and because of that, there is a sort of potential aspect for the unelect or reprobate, but his death is of such that it efficaciously purchases the salvation and everything necessary, regeneration, faith, etc., for the elect. Would you agree with that?
It does purchase, if you want to use that analogy, it does purchase everything connected with salvation. Everything that needs to be purchased is purchased. It's not, there's nothing additional that needs to be added to Christ's work.
So I guess my objection to the idea that Christ purchased faith is twofold. One, it's not the language of Scripture, but two, it's not the concept of Scripture either, because like in the case of, it would be unjust for God to just let a sinner into heaven. So justice has to be satisfied, and that's why Christ died on the cross. So the sense that payment was made makes a whole lot of sense to me, right? Because justice is an obstacle for God letting people into heaven. But on the other hand, there doesn't seem to be a similar obstacle to giving faith. Like, why couldn't God just give faith? Why did Christ have to die for God to give faith out?
Well, when I answered, I meant to some extent hedge on that point, in the sense that if it needed to be purchased, then it was purchased. But if it doesn't need to be purchased, then it's just everything that does need to be purchased was purchased. But the commercial metaphor is just one of the metaphors of Scripture. It's not the only metaphor. The sacrificial metaphor is arguably is a bigger metaphor than the redemptive metaphor. So they're both are common metaphors in Scripture of salvation, but the sacrificial one is at least as big as the commercial one.
Right. Yeah, 100% agree with that. So, but maybe back to refocus us on this. I actually did looked up the Lombardian formula itself, because it came up repeatedly in the debate, and I was like, wouldn't it be helpful if we actually looked at the thing? So, yeah, let me put this back on the screen, and I'm going to need your help, Turd Fan, because this is definitely a you thing. So it is here in Sentences, Book 3, Distinction 20, Capitulum 5. But I put this Latin into ChatGTP, but you can tell me if ChatGTP is hallucinating, because it can. So this, let's see, where did it go? Okay, this is what ChatGTP returned. So Christ, therefore, is both priest and the very sacrifice and price of our reconciliation, who had offered himself on the altar of the cross, not to the devil, but to God, the Trinity, for all, in terms of the sufficiency of the price, but for the elect alone in terms of its efficacy, because he brought about salvation only for the predestined. So, as far as I can tell, that's the original wording of the famous Lombardian formula. And for those that don't know, like Peter Lombard was the master of the sentences, and a lot of the scholastics like Aquinas, Occam, Duns Scotus, they all commented on Lombard. So he had a wide influence on the church. Anyways, okay, with that said, are you comfortable with this language? Like, do you agree with him that Christ offered himself on the cross, not to the devil, but to God, the Trinity, for all, in terms of the sufficiency of the price.
Well, of course, in terms of the sufficiency of the price, it's a sacrifice of infinite worth.
So what do you think he means by the phrase for all? That Christ offered himself for all. What do you think Lombard means by that?
Well, I'm going just with the explanation he offers here. Now, if they offer some further explanation somewhere else, that's fine. But here he just says in terms of the sufficiency of the price.
So the argument I offered in the debate is like that the word for either means intent or effect. What do you think that part of the intention in the cross is that the cross be sufficient to, I guess, enable salvation for the non-elect? And if you do, what are we debating?
The price that was paid was an adequate price to redeem all mankind.
That's not what I'm asking. So
Well, I'm giving you the explanation of what the for means here. If it's not what you're asking, that's fine. It just means that you're asking something. If I'm understanding you correctly, then you're asking something that's not directed to what he said here.
okay. So again, so do you disagree with me when I say, hey, if I'm doing this for you, that it's either my intention or the effect of what I'm doing for you?
I do disagree that it can be reduced down that way. Yes.
Okay. So what do you think he means here when he's saying that Christ offered himself on the altar for all?
Literally what he says that follows there, in terms of the sufficiency of the price. In other words, the price is a sufficient price to redeem all mankind. Not that it actually does redeem all mankind, but that it's a price sufficient to do so.
Right. But so was it God's intention for that price to be sufficient for the non-elect?
I have no problem with that because the offer of the gospel is universal, and it's a legitimate offer, and in order in order for God to justly condemn someone, I feel like there should be a legitimate offer there. So I have no problem with it being his intent for it to be sufficient for all, but then his intent, as it says, is to purchase the salvation of the elect efficiently. I have no problem with that.
Right. That's that. Yeah. I mean, I think we're on the same page. That is the dual intention that we're talking about. But
the difference would be that it doesn't. You use the word enable, which I think would kind of hints at the prevenient grace there. As far as sticking to this, we were kind of agreeing that the intent is that it be sufficient for all for the purposes of the universal offer of the gospel, but his ultimate intent is to purchase the salvation of the elect, which would be limited atonement.
Well, for that aspect would. I mean, so there's an intention for it to be sufficient for the non-elect, and there's an intention that it be efficient for the elect. So it's a dual intent, I guess. So,
Sheridan, do you have a problem with that language, or how are you feeling about it?
Yeah. I don't think that it's necessary to focus on the intent. In other words, I think that focusing on the intent might be a mistake. But the question, as it's stated there, the point is just that the price is enough for all. He offered himself for all in terms of the sufficiency of the price. In other words, he offered himself with enough value to save everyone in the way that he is characterizing this. The price being, in other words, if the necessary amount of atonement to save all mankind is 1 drachma, then he died 1 drachma. He died enough price to redeem all mankind. Not that. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question, Turton fan. So, if you're just talking about the value of Christ's person, isn't his death sufficient to save the devil and all the demons?
I would say that it's not not sufficient to save the devil and the demons. And the reason why is because he didn't take on the nature of the devil and the demons.
Okay, so good. Now let's see if we can understand the difference between. But okay, but the value of Christ's person seems like it's enough. Like if anything's gonna be bought, there's nothing more worthwhile to trade, right?
So his death is the same death is needed whether he's saving one human being or 10 times the actual number of human beings.
Agreed. But so if we are just abstracting the value, then I don't have a problem with saying that the value of Christ's death is enough. He could have transacted and redeemed the demons with it, his death. Of course he could.
Well, it's not from that's so it's not that it's not merely that he's that the infinite dignity of him as God, which is important, but it's also the fact that he died as a man. He can't die as a demon or so he can't. So he's not able to offer the value, the kind of thing that's needed to save even one demon.
So
now, could he have taken on the nature of angels? Maybe, and I don't know how angels can die, but so that would be a whole branched path. But the reason that his death is not sufficient for even one demon is that it's not the right kind of payment.
Okay, but you're not just to make sure you're not saying that the fact that Christ took on humanity made his death more valuable. It just means it's more directed towards, more intended towards humans. But it doesn't make it like worth more, right?
I'm not saying that a human being that by the nature of things. Well, hold on. I do think that because human beings are made in the image of God, that they are of greater value than even more powerful beings like angels. But even if I'm wrong about that, and even my point is not that Christ's death is insufficient for demons, because he would need to done a lot more suffering and dying for a demon. The point is that it's the wrong kind of payment for a demon, because it's not a demonic punishment that he underwent. He underwent a human punishment. So it's not that it would be the wrong, and not a payment that's not of enough value. It's just a payment of a very large value that's not relevant. It's an irrelevant payment to the devils. He didn't come for that.
But how relevant is it to the non-elect? How is it more relevant to the non-elect?
Because they have the same nature as we do.
So then doesn't that extend the atonement to the non-elect? Like
the
that was the intent
of it. Yes, yeah.
But the intention too, because that was God's design. Like it can't be an accident or coincidence, right? So the fact that Christ took on humanity, so isn't that God's intention as well?
So I don't disagree with the idea that this is not some kind of cosmic accident. In other words, it's not like God accidentally suffered and died to pay with a value that's sufficient for the reprobate. That's not a coincidence or an accident, but that to suggest that there's some other intent behind it. I guess what I'm having trouble here is, of course, God intends the consequences of his actions. So when Christ dies as a human being, and therefore it's the right kind of payment for Judas, let's say, exactly the kind of payment Judas would need, and enough to cover the sins of Judas were it to be applied to him. And that certainly is Christ's intent, in the sense that he doesn't do anything without knowing the consequences. But to suggest that there's some other kind of intent to it would require some further demonstration. So I don't have a problem with saying that. And actually, that's one of the one of the problematic things of very glib comments like saying he died for the world or he died for all or something like that. If you don't explain what it means, then you can just say, well, he died in a way that's sufficient to cover the sins of all. Not that he intended to save them, but he did intend that his payment is enough that they could be saved if they believed.
Okay. Well, I mean, I have to push back. I mean, obviously that's scriptural language, so calling it glib is
no, I'm saying
hurtful
that,
to my ears.
well, no, that you're misunderstanding me. I'm saying that it's okay for Calvinists to adopt that wording, but that in a discussion where people have a different understanding of God's intention behind the atonement, that kind of high level agreement is potentially misleading to people, which is why today, like while Calvin was comfortable using those kind of terminology before the intra-Protestants debating on this subject, there's a lot lower comfort level that we have today because we feel like people are going to misunderstand what we're saying. People are going to hear that and they're going to say, oh, Christ was trying to save those other people. His intention was to try to save them. That's not what we would be saying. And it's not what Farris is saying either, if I understood him correctly. But, that's...
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did have one other thing on sufficiency to bring out, and this is from the Potter's Freedom. And let's see. So I'll read this bit. A common but not fully reformed assertion is that Christ's death was sufficient to save every single human being, but efficient to save only the elect. While this statement carries truth, it misses the most important issue, whether it was Christ's intention to make full and complete atonement for every single individual, making atonement theoretically possible but not actual, or whether it was his intention to make full atonement for all those given to him by the Father, the elect. Both sides can use the statement. The Arminian can say it is true since the elect is determined not by God's choice, but by man's. Therefore, this saying, popular since the scholastic period of church history, really says nothing to the point of the debate. I think I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying and what Dr. White's saying here. I imagine you agree with him.
It would be a surprise if I had a strong disagreement with him on this particular subject. But yeah, I mean, as far as whether something is fully reformed or not fully reformed, arose by any other name will smell as sweet. I don't care if it, which is the truly reformed category. But I think his point at the end, both sides in quotation marks can use the statement. I think that is getting to the point I was saying earlier. If we as Calvinists go around pointing out that Christ died for the world, which is it's a true statement that we can make. But when we say it, especially in the context of a debate with people who have an unlimited atonement view, it can be very misleading because there's a cultural assumption behind it now that means something else other than what we would be intending by it. And that's why you tend not to hear people like Dr. White saying that.
Yeah.
Something that he said. Could you pull that quote back up? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hang on just a sec. There we go.
Because it's touching on something that I wrote down when I was listening to the presentation. He says, while the statement carries truth, it misses the most important issue, whether it was Christ's intention to make full and complete atonement for every single individual, making salvation theoretically possible but not actual, or whether it was his intention to make full atonement for all those given to him by the Father, the elect. I think that's a real important part. Like an infinite value or infinite sufficiency does not equate a potential efficacy. And I think that's an important distinction that he's kind of making here.
But then doesn't seem insufficient, right? Like, so if it can't save them, then it's not enough.
Well, I'm saying it doesn't present a potential efficacy for the for the elect. Like God, he actually efficaciously saved the elect. If you want to say that there's some sort of potential thing left where if they would actually believe, they would be saved. I have no problem with that. But
that's hypothetical universalism, right? If they believe, then they would be saved because of what Christ has provided. That just is straightforward 4-point Calvinism, right?
no. That's something that you can look up. Ligonier, their website says basically the same thing. Like Christ's death is sufficient for all, and Turretin fan basically said it earlier, like to where it's of infinite value, to where if someone actually believed, they would be saved. But his intention behind it was to actually purchase the salvation of the elect in such a way that it's 100% guaranteed they're going to be saved. There's no potentialness to it.
So I guess what I'd say is that the difference that it's being drawn, and it's a very, very fine line. If I'm hearing Mr. Fan correctly here, he's saying that the value of Christ's atonement is infinite, and it could purchase the non-elect if it had been intended for them, but it's not intended for them. But the alternative side, the hypothetical universal side, is that the value of Christ's atonement is intended to be sufficient for all, in that it's a basis and available such that if everyone believed, everyone would be justified by Christ's blood. It's very subtle difference, but it seems there, and it seems strong enough to substantiate a difference between 4 and 5-point Calvinists.
Could you elaborate that difference one more time?
Well, yeah, sure. I think the French fries example was perfect, although I get it that it's not commercial, but the idea is both. Well, what actually was bought, right? And then, did you buy enough fries to go around or not? And if you bought enough fries, then you can offer fries to people because you have them to provide, even if they will never accept because they hate French fries, right? But on the other hand, if you only buy fries for just your family, offering fries to others, it seems like you could have bought more fries because the Hope Diamond has enough for fries for all. It's worth enough to buy fries for everyone in the store, but that's not what you actually bought. And so you are offering people fries that they're not going to accept because they hate fries. So, but if they did, the question is, well, did you already do you have the fries on hand to give them?
So I feel like the fries one gets me farther from understanding where you're going, but maybe it's because we're somehow talking past each other. So
Sure.
There's as I said, there's several different analogies in Scripture. If we focused on the redemption analogy, that Jesus paid a ransom, and if we're talking about the price of ransom that he paid, so if the ransom metaphor for salvation, if we look at the price he paid, that price is enough to purchase the freedom of every human being and additional human beings that are ever going to be created. So there's no insufficiency as to the value of the ransom payment, but the intent behind making that payment was to redeem a particular people. And go ahead.
So okay, so let's say you're bailing your friends out. You pay the ransom. Let's say I get kidnapped or whatever. Once you've paid the ransom, can you use those funds again, or are they in the hands of the person that was holding me in prison or hostage or whatever?
I'm sorry, I'm just shooting some of the comments. So if the intent has the payment was made on the cross, so the payment has been transacted, and if the deal at the cross was to fund an open account that can later be drawn from, that's one intent. And if it was to redeem specific people, whether they were whether the specific people are just foreseen as having faith, or whether they're in not whether they're foreseen, whether they're actually predetermined to have faith, is not particularly the issue. The question is, if the payment was made for those who believe, then that's what happened on the cross.
So, okay, I'll ask one more time, and then then I'm ready to move on, because we probably should. But so, okay, let's say Twitchy and I both get kidnapped, right? And so you take all the money you have and you ransom Jerry. But now that money is in the hands of whoever had Jerry, right?
Mhm.
You no longer have the funds, right?
Right.
So after you've done that transaction, how can you have the funds to ransom me or offer to ransom me?
So it would the where that analogy, the short answer is you wouldn't have funds in that scenario, right? But the reason that analogy breaks down is because the offer is not an offer to go back in time and change what happened at the cross. The offer is, if you believe, Christ will save you, and that is a genuine offer because it's true. If you believe, He will save you.
Okay, like I said, I'm happy to move on to the next point.
Can we bring up? Can you pull up the apologetic dog's comment? I'm sorry, I just want to give him a shout out. He was one of the
beard
debaters.
comment, yeah, that one or different one?
Yeah, that one's perfect. And I just want to say, check out snakecrusherproducts.online. Great beard oil. Use promo code Twitchy for 15% off. Okay. Appreciate you being on the channel, Jeremiah.
100%. Jeremiah was awesome. He's such a wonderful host. His church is wonderful. Everyone there was so nice to me. I couldn't be more appreciative of Jeremiah and his approach.
I'm gonna beat him in basketball one of these days. You'll see, guys.
Haha. Yes, sir.
So is clarify for me, because I'm out of the loop. And I don't mean any disrespect by this. Is the apologetic dog was the moderator of the debate?
No. Jeremiah Nortier is the apologetic dog.
Okay, so he was the participant in the debate, and he was in the channel looking at in the chat during the debate. Okay.
Yeah, I told him. I said, "Dude, you're supposed to be focusing. What are you doing?"
Okay. And who was the gentleman that was moderating the debate?
Oh, that's one of Jeremiah's co-pastors.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was just a co-pastor of the
yeah.
same church. Okay.
Yes.
That
yeah,
makes more sense now. I didn't think about that possibility of multiple pastors. All right.
Yeah, 3. It's like elder led. So there's 3. Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. There's a question in there for you, Mr. Chapa.
Okay.
If you want to handle it, feel free. Or we have another option is to go to the audience Q&A, because there was a question that I had that it was intended to address this sufficiency question.
Okay. Whatever you want. Yeah, I can
Use the moment to grab the question if you can, because it's like the Matrix with these questions coming in, so many people watching.
Okay, go ahead.
So this one.
So just Lincoln time. Mr. Chapa, the question is, what is the gospel intended for concerning the non-elect reprobate? Was it for mercy, or that God will show his justice? And then I'm not quite sure what that is. And then holiness, as they are vessels of wrath prepared for destruction. Okay, good question. Let me think about how to answer. Do you mind pulling it back up? Let me think about that for more.
So cover yourself, our friend.
That's all right. I can make faces and no one can see me.
So I guess part of my question would be a question back. Why is God wrathful at these vessels for destruction? And I think the answer is sin. And I think Dr. White brought out pretty clearly that part of their sin is unbelief in the gospel. So it's kind of it's not even the chicken and the egg. Part of the reason why they're prepared for destruction is because of their rejection of the gospel. So this, okay. I'm not making things simple today, am I? But let me explain that, as I understand it, the difference between supralapsarianism and Amyraldianism. So, oh, what happened here? Hang on, I got an audio problem. My apologies. Okay, no, not the intent, but okay, yeah, we can go back to, yeah. All right, so Theodore Beza was instrumental in the early proclamation of clear limited atonement. People debate about Calvin. I think he taught unlimited atonement, but people debate about him. But Beza, no one debates about. He definitely taught limited atonement, and he was a supralapsarian. And then other early adopters like William Perkins put out his chart, and he's definitely supralapsarian. Now, Owen was another early adopter, and he used supralapsarian logic in chapter 3, but he himself was actually an infralapsarianism. Anyways, but the point is this. Supralapsarianism starts with the end and works backwards. Okay? So basically, you start with a picture of, people going to heaven, people going to hell. And then the question is, well, what means is God going to use to accomplish that? Right? And so in some sense, the plan is developed the inverse chronological order. And in that sense, limited atonement really makes sense, because it'd be like, okay, well, how am I going to guarantee that these folks end up in heaven? Well, I'll give them a definitive atonement, right? And so you have this kind of logical structure of, I'm going to guarantee that these people end up in heaven by using a definitive atonement for them. And part of the way you have the reprobate end up in hell is you don't give them that. And there you go. And that guarantees that the reprobate end up in hell and that the elect end up in heaven. Okay, now, Amyraldianism is the other way around, right? Where you start with the beginning and work forward. So God permits the fall, but he has a solution to the fall, which is an unlimited atonement and a universal gospel offer. But God, of the people that are now fallen but savable, then God saves some of them. Not all of them, but some of them. And so,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm listening. What's up?
I need to bite my tongue. I'll wait till you're in.
Right. So with that approach of you start from the beginning of history and work forward, Amyraldianism provides for a universal offer of the gospel first, and then the election of of certain people to believe that gospel.
My understanding, and I could be mistaken because there may be different stripes and varieties, is that it's something like that he dies for all on the condition of faith. But then the problem is that doesn't make salvation possible for anyone on Amyraldianism, because the fall has rendered everyone incapable of faith. So on top of this atonement that's hypothetically universal in Amyraldianism, that there's also this additional decree to give faith to the elect, and therefore to save them using this previous universal atonement.
That's all true. I agree with everything you said, but I would add to it that this is a logical order, not a chronological order. But the logical order under Amyraldianism more so follows the chronological order, whereas the logical order on supralapsarian is the inverse of the chronological order. But the reason why I'm saying that is that in supralapsarianism there is an elect, and then Christ is sent to secure the elect, to guarantee their salvation. Whereas on Amyraldianism, Christ is elect first, and his mission of the cross for the world or for everyone is first. And then people become elect based on what Christ did on the cross. So, in other words, it's on the Amyraldian scheme. It's like it's impossible that Christ would die just for the elect, because there are no elect when God's decision was made for Christ to die for the world.
And with that, unless there's more, or Jerry, we feel like we're kind of hogging the mic here. But if
No, I don't. It's good. Like when I see you two cooking, you guys do this all the time together, and I'm fine just eating myself.
okay, thanks.
Not eating myself, but eating as well as along with the chat.
Understood. All right. So this was. I'm not saying this is my favorite part of the debate, but it was, narcissistically, it was the most interesting part of the debate for me. But it went to a point of the debate that I thought was important, and I wasn't sure at the time when I asked the question whether it would be completely addressed. So I asked the question before the end of the debate, as was required. You couldn't ask the audience questions online after the end of the debate. So here's that part.
Okay, we're going to ask from online. So I don't know if it matters the username. This is from Turton Fan, and it's
Oh, boy.
a question for Dr. Farris. Does Christ actually take away the sins of the world, actually propitiate the world's sins, and actually redeem the reprobate from all iniquity and from the curse of the law? If so, please explain Revelation 14:4.
That's a lot in 30 seconds.
Oh, well,
My
well,
goodness.
you get
1
a whole,
minute.
You get a whole minute.
Oh, I get a whole minute.
Would you like me to repeat the question before
Sure.
we start? Okay. So the question is, does Christ actually take away the sins of the world, actually propitiate the world's sins, and actually redeem the reprobate from all iniquity and from the curse of the law? If so, please explain Revelation 14:4. And let me just, so we don't have to take the time out of it, I'll read Revelation 14:4 so it won't take away from your 60 seconds. So Revelation chapter 14, verse 4. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. Okay. You're going to have 60 seconds.
Yeah, briefly to the first part of the question. It depends on what we mean by the nature of the atonement, the mechanism, once again, that needs to be answered. What he means by propitiation, I'm not sure. Propitiation is not entirely clear in every single case in the New Testament, so that would have to be defined. There are different atoning mechanisms in history that are described that describe the atonement worth or value as something that does something objectively on behalf of the moral order and does something on behalf of all people, and is effectively applied in terms of the remunerative benefits that are applied directly to those who are participating or identifying with Christ himself. And so I think it depends, once again, on how we're defining our terms. But I think, go ahead.
Do I have time?
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Yeah, John, 1 John 2:2, it's the atoning sacrifice. It can be translated propitiation, but it's for our sins, not our sins only, but for sins of the whole world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah, well,
So
Thank you, Dan, for giving me a question or answer I could understand.
So the reason I brought this up was because there was a lot of emphasis on supposedly it seemed to me that parts of the debate that there was a lot of emphasis on the sufficiency not being quote unquote actual sufficiency. And the reason for the question, of course, is to go to the wording that's provided in some of the passages that are often cited in support of universal atonement, and to ask the question of whether what Dr. Farris is saying is that the people's sins were potentially taken away or they were actually taken away. And if he says that they're actually taken away, then of course there's some question about how is that not universalism? But and then the same thing for the other, like propitiating our sins, reconciling us to. There's several verses that were in mind there. I think 3 or 4 verses that kind of blended into the question. And then, of course, the question is if he's going to say that all of these are general and that they apply to everyone, and there's something that's actually done in these, which I couldn't know for sure how he's going to go at the point when I asked the question. Then if he says yes, then I would question how and why is the text in Revelation 14 talk about people being redeemed from out of mankind as distinct from just saying that everyone is redeemed. And I thought that it would at least highlight or provide an opportunity for him to explain what he means by sufficient as it applies to the actual biblical text, as opposed to the theory in a vacuum. And unfortunately, from the way I heard it anyway, there was a few things of like, well, it depends what you mean. It depends what you mean. And then there's a bunch of different mechanisms. And then a very general statement about that, reiterating his original point, which is that he does something general and he also does something specific. But as far as actually getting to the understanding of the key texts, he didn't want to go there. Maybe he felt he clearly thought the time wasn't sufficient. So that's part of it, at least. But yeah, that was the reason for the question, the context of the question, and why I asked the question. So hopefully, I don't know. And I didn't ask Dan because I kind of already think I know what Dan's answer is on some of these points. I asked him because I didn't know what his answer was, Dr. Farris's answer was. And that was the reason for targeting him as opposed to the entire side in the question.
It's impossible to answer that loaded of a question in 60 seconds. It just can't be done.
Do you think you could answer the question, does he actually take away the sins of the world in 60 seconds?
Depends what you mean by actually. Yeah, I sound like him, right? But yeah, depends what you mean. So look, okay, the sin bearer. All right, let's start with there. In the Old Testament, in Leviticus 16, on the Day of Atonement, the people had a sin bearer in the scapegoat. However, if they did not humble themselves or if they cursed God, then they would still bear their own sins. So it is a conditional sin bearing. Now, I think what you mean is not the opportunity and offer and provision to bear sins, but rather those that meet the condition, they do humble themselves, they don't curse God, then their sins are actually or at least symbolically taken away, and because of the faith that they express, they're actually justified by Christ's blood. So if you're talking about the application, then of course the application, not everyone is justified. So you could have, if you had phrased the question of instead of actual sin bearing, if what you really mean is, are they justified? Is everyone justified by Christ's blood? And the answer is just obviously no. And I think that's what you mean. So the answer, I think the best way to answer your question is just no for sin bearing. Now for propitiation, different answer, because there it really comes down to, does it mean an atoning sacrifice? But I think maybe looking at the passage in Revelation makes sense.
Well, before you get there,
okay.
My straightforward answer is, does he actually take away the sins of the world? Is yes, he does. I don't have to qualify that. But the problem is, of course, the meaning of the word world. That's the problem.
Where did John the Baptist get that language?
That he takes away the sins of the world?
Does he get it from Yom Kippur, from the Day of Atonement?
I don't have a specific biblical allusion in mind as far as that. He says the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world.
You don't think he's talking about the Yom Kippur?
I think that he's talking about the scapegoat when he says the lamb? Is that what you're asking?
Okay, yeah. So fair enough. So it bounces off of Isaiah 53, but it's still the same idea. It's still sin bearing. Where did he get this idea from sin bearing, if not from the Old Testament?
Well, he does get the idea of taking away the sin of the world from the Old Testament, of course.
Right, and so that's why I said that Dr. White's concession, when he basically said, he understood that the sacrifices in the Old Testament didn't always result in ritual purification. He understood that.
Right.
And so the language in the Old Testament is not talking about a definitive atonement. That's a different interpretation of those terms than John the Baptist would have had. John the Baptist wouldn't have didn't think of it the way you did. He thought of it the way it was in Leviticus, a conditional sin bearing.
I think he did think of it the way I'm thinking of it, but maybe not with the detail that you're trying to that we're trying to debate necessarily. But certainly I do think that he was thinking of it the way I had in mind. I don't want to turn this into a re-debate, given that you had other topics that you mentioned that you also thought were of interest in the debate, and we otherwise could get stuck on this one for the entire time.
Well, I think the Revelation 14 passage would be worth taking a quick look. And I'm not sure on this one. I'm not sure how you view it. I'm not quite sure what I think of it either, but just reading this. So you asked about 14:4, but just going back, getting some context. Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood a lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and the Father's name written on their foreheads. So they're clearly saved. And I heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters and the sounds of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of a harpist playing on the harp. And they were singing a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and before the elders. No one could learn that song except the 44,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. Okay. And these who had not defiled themselves with women, for they were virgins. Anyways, he goes on. Okay, so the point... Well, let me ask this. Can we agree that these folks are in heaven?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to say something that, Dr. Farris might punch me for or whatever. Once you get to heaven or hell, limited atonement is very much, in a very practical sense, true. Because once somebody is in heaven, there's no chance they're going to end up in hell. And once somebody's in hell, there's no chance they're going to end up in heaven. So limited atonement or unlimited atonement, universal atonement, only provides an opportunity in this life before they've reached that final outcome. And so once somebody has squandered all their opportunities and ends up in hell, they don't have another shot. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess what I'd say is it's kind of like I would call it from a logical standpoint, like a hasty generalization to say, well, there's people in the afterlife and they're either in heaven or hell, and that's settled. And that's a hasty generalization to take it from that context and put it into, well, that means during their whole life, they never had opportunities, right? It's just now, once they're in heaven or hell, all their opportunities are spent.
I don't disagree with the idea that there's different opportunities in this life and the next life. The reason for bringing it up really was the expression "redeemed from mankind" or "redeemed from the earth," but especially the redeemed from mankind because it's more specific. So the question was, if all of mankind was redeemed, then to say that these are redeemed from mankind doesn't make much sense.
So, and what I'm saying is, like, at this point, once people are in heaven and hell, I think limited atonement is basically correct. Yeah.
Okay. Can I just now, Twitchy, you have more experience with clipping audio. Just get that part. Cut out every the context beforehand. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I did the same thing with flowers earlier today. I'll do that for you, Dan, and people love it.
That's right.
All right. So the
Okay.
so
All right. Cool.
I appreciate
Cool.
your response, and for yeah, I appreciate sometimes the question can be too much to handle in a 60-second time period. And let's see, what is another topic? I don't know how long your time limits are also for everyone else, for whoever's participating. I forgot to ask up front. Jerry, do you have a time limit?
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer not to go past like 11:30 because I got to be up by like 8 to do this. But anyways, I got to be up by 8. That's all that matters.
Okay. And you, Dan, you may have it even sooner, or no?
Yeah. So, yeah, I can keep going, but I can also be less long-winded.
Okay. Well, I would like to be done by 11 Eastern at the latest, but I'm also okay with stopping
fine with
sooner
that.
if you want to stop sooner.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's
Right.
cool. That's cool. Let's target that. Okay. Did you want to look at the John 6 stuff? I have that queued up.
It's you're driving this ship or sailing the ship, whatever that term is.
Okay, let's see. And I'm going to apologize in advance if it goes to commercial. Although, actually, why don't you just mute me just in case it does?
Okay, your screen is muted.
Thanks.
Yep, sure enough, there's the advertisements. But thankfully, no one's having to endure whatever audio.
Okay.
Only Jerry's advertisements are allowed on here.
That's right. Okay, here we go.
I'll read this text, John 6, 50 through 54. And this is the bread that comes down from heaven so that one may eat of it and not die. I'm the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of the bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I give for the life of the world is my flesh. The Jews then disputed amongst themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say unto you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Okay. Notice that the purpose of providing the bread is for the life of the world. So it's universal in scope. Notice that the unbelieving Jews immediately understood that the word world included them, because they said, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? If the 5-point Calvinist position were correct about the definition of the word world, how could these Jews infer that Christ's flesh provided to the world is provided to them? If Christ supposedly never died for them, how can they be provided with his flesh and blood to eat? This passage directly contradicts the idea of definitive atonement. It also shows that the definition of the word world includes those that are not given to the Father, the unbelieving Jews who rejected Christ and his word.
Okay, and then this came up in cross-examination. I'll see if I can pull it. Hopefully there's no ad. If there is, just mute me.
I got the mute button handy.
Okay, I think we're good.
In John chapter 6, you had the very clear presentation on the part of Jesus where he specifically says that all the Father gives me will come to me, the one coming to me I'll never cast out. And then he had said in verse 44, no one is able to come to me unless the Father sent me draws him, and I'll raise him up on the last day. Isn't that the context that determines what is being said about Jesus' flesh as food in what comes afterwards? Isn't that the determinative lens?
It's certainly very sorry. It's certainly very helpful, yes, because what it shows is the nice contrast between those that are given, those that aren't, and it's to those that aren't that Christ gives his flesh, and they're saying, how can he give us his flesh?
But aren't they rejecting his? They're rejecting his flesh. They're rejecting his message. So why do you say that it's being offered to them?
Because they're rejecting something. They're rejecting the flesh that was provided for them.
Okay. All right. Romans chapter 8.
Okay. That was the sum total of the conversation on John 6 in the debate.
So you didn't ask Nortier about it?
No.
Okay.
I talked to him about John 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what I like about that argument, well, the number one thing I like about that argument is it's based in Scripture. For me, this is like the huge. For me, it was like night and day, but the two presentations. And so the presentation that's focused on Scripture is important to me, and it matters. It's not the rose by any other name, who's the truly reformed, this kind of thing. And it's certainly not, some kind of just empty theory. It's a question about, well, the text says X, Y, and Z. So explain how this works. Now, I'm sure we have different takes on it, but I think that this is a specific topic that, in theory, one could have a focused debate directly on this text. But ultimately, I think the biggest part of this that poses a challenge to a tulip crowd, and I'm counting myself in that crowd. The biggest challenge is let's see, where is this? The bread. So verse 51. The bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. So I think that this statement that I will give for the life of the world, and that's which the ESV, but the King James is quite similar. Can pull it up quickly, I think.
Yeah, I got you.
Or you can pull it up quickly.
Yeah.
So I tend to like the King James version even more than the ESV, but that's largely just me. But anyway, so it says the flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. So this key expression is I will give for the life of the world. To me, the biggest question is actually it's less about whether the Jews are accepting or rejecting it. To me, that part of it, I don't have any problem. I don't think it's any problem responding to it. I think the bigger question is, so what does he mean? I will give this for the life of the world. Does he mean, if we were going to go back to that Lombardian formula, does he just mean that what he's going to give is enough to give life to the entire world? Or does he mean that he actually intends this to give life to the world? And
I apologize.
Go ahead.
I apologize. Did I hear you correctly? You said it's not a problem that they're rejecting his flesh?
I
though
don't
he
see
didn't
that
die
part
for
of
them?
that. Yeah, I don't see that part of it as a problematic problematic argument. I didn't feel like that was an argument that I would have any trouble overcoming. But I thought that it was more, the part that needs more explanation is the part about I will give my life, I will give for the life of the world.
Okay, maybe we can circle back to that first part, but I registered what you said. Okay.
So I think it's something to think about in terms of I haven't heard this verse brought up a lot in these contexts, but if this goes back to your earlier statement when you were doing the analysis of Lombard's Latin, you brought up the pro, and you said, well, what does pro here or for here mean? Here, I don't remember what the Greek word is, but the question is, what does this expression mean? And I would be curious, partly I would be curious what you think that it means in the context, from the context of, it says huper is the Greek word there. But what does this for the life of the world mean here? Does he mean that it's an exchange? Does he what is it? How do you take that?
How do I take it?
Yeah. How do you take it?
The intention is to provide the bread. It's like the manna. The manna is all over the ground, and you either eat it or you don't. But if you eat it, then you're nourished by it. In the same way, the flesh is provided. If you eat it, meaning in this case, believe it, then you will have eternal life. And if you don't, you won't. But the provision is there.
The interesting thing is I don't take it that way. I take it, I mean, I if I took it this way, that it's just that there is a provision here that's available to the world. Of course, then it doesn't have any impact on the Calvinism, Arminianism debate as such, because it's available on either view if someone believes it's available. But and then we'd have to get into the question about whether or not people rejecting it and so forth, are they rejecting something? But
What is available?
Salvation's available. Life is available.
The French fries, the infinite French fries.
Okay.
But
I mean, Christ's flesh and blood is available for them, right? How can that be if he didn't die for them?
how can it be that it's available if he didn't die for them?
Yeah,
And the answer there would be, go ahead.
As far as they're concerned, what's the difference between Christ never died at all?
What's the difference to them if Christ never died at all if they don't trust in him?
That if Christ never died for them at all, it was never provided for them. It was never on the table.
But what difference is that to them if they don't accept it?
It's that they had it there, motivating them, and it is a further condemnation to them for rejecting it.
So let's take your French fries example, and let's say that that I go in with the Hope Diamond and so forth, and I buy French fries, and then on the table where everybody's welcome to take French fries, it appears that the table's just loaded with French fries. Doesn't matter whether all those apparent French fries are real or not in terms of people rejecting the French fries.
Yeah, I mean, so they can sniff the fries and be like, okay, I should eat these fries. I'm really hungry and I can smell the fries. So it's like alluring. But in addition to it being alluring, then they only have themselves to blame. Once they walk out the restaurant without eating the fries, they should be like, man, I had them. They were right there. I just didn't.
But I mean, from that standpoint, even if it was just a mirage of the fries, that they were an illusion of fries, the same is true in that case. The same is true that they only have themselves to blame because they didn't take this, even if in fact they couldn't actually have taken it, but they only have themselves to blame because they didn't take it, and they voluntarily didn't take it. They willingly didn't take it.
I don't get your point about the mirage.
So in terms of blaming them for rejecting it, whether it's intended for them or just available to them doesn't change the fact that they're rejecting it. In other words, it doesn't have to be intended for them in order for them to reject it. It can just be available and they don't take it.
No, I think that's it. I have a serious problem with that because that sounds like a deception. If it was a mirage, it's like a lie.
Well, okay, that's fine. If it was a deception, if it was a mirage and a deception, then that's an independent problem that there's a deception going on. But it doesn't change the deception part doesn't change whether or not they are voluntarily not taking the fries. It's not that they were deceived into not taking the fries. It's not like the fries were made to look worse to them. and in fact the fries are really good, and so they were tricked into not taking the fries. In this case,
No.
the fries were presented before them, right?
No. If they had grabbed for the fries, they had to come up with air or smoke because it was a mirage.
So their inability to bring about this situation that didn't happen doesn't seem to have any bearing on their culpability for what they actually did do, which is say no to the fries and walk out.
I don't know how you can blame someone for not eating fries that don't exist.
It's not so much that in that case that you're blaming them for not eating fries, you're blaming them for not even wanting the fries.
Maybe I've derailed you too much. Why don't you go back to the text, because you were on a roll and then I derailed you. So I apologize for derailing you.
No, it's okay. So I'm saying that he does give life to the world. His sacrifice does give life to the world, and that the misunderstanding that's presented is treating this word world as though it means each and every person. And if you take that out of it, then in fact he does give life to the world. He actually enlivens the world with this flesh that he gives. So it's not you don't have to make it somehow potential or it's just available. He actually gives life to the world. So I think that's, in some sense, that's the strength of a Calvinistic explanation of this, is you remove this potentiality out of the text. But at the same time, it is important. A lot of that comes down to understanding what the word world means here. So that a lot hinges on that particular part. That said, maybe you want to, I know you said you wanted to circle back on the other part that I thought I could handle easily.
Well, no, follow your train of thought. So how did Christ's audience understand the word world? Did they understand it to include them?
Whether they misunderstood that they were the part of the ones to be being given life, whether they misunderstood that seems to me somewhat inconsequential.
So the way his immediate audience understood him is not consequential, right? Because you understand it so much better than his immediate audience.
No, because they have a misunderstanding about themselves. I have a better take on them than they do, not because they have that they have a better take on his words than I do. But I do have a better take on his words because I have the rest of the gospel.
Okay, this is the first. So just they literally understood. You understand the semantic domain of cosmos better.
No, that's not. No, they understood the same semantic domain of cosmos. That's not the question.
I don't think it's the same at all. I mean, we're 2,000 years removed.
I do I'm not saying they had the wrong semantic domain of the word world. I think they had the right understanding, which is the same as my understanding. But my point is not about that. My point, when you say whether they thought they're going to get life from this bread, I think they very well may have thought they'll get life from this bread. But the question isn't whether they will get life. The question you asked was whether they're somehow part of the world. Of course, they're part of the world, and they think they're going to get life. But the reason they're wrong about getting life is because they don't have faith in Christ.
So, and the point I'm making is that your understanding of the word world is very different than theirs.
But I disagree with you about that fundamental point. I think that mine is exactly the same as theirs.
So they think they're included within the world. You don't.
No, that's not what I said. And again, you're.
That's what I'm saying.
I know you're saying it, but your understanding of theirs is different. But mine understanding of theirs is the same. You're understanding the word world as though it's a list of people, and that's not how they understood it.
Okay, I feel like I'm being gaslighted right now.
Okay, well, we can agree to disagree, and that's fine.
Okay, try one more time. I'll go on mute. Explain to me how they don't think of themselves as part of it. My position right now is they think when Christ says the word world, it includes them. You think when Christ says the word world, it doesn't include them. And those two perspectives are night and day different. So I'll go on mute. I'll just listen to you.
So I don't agree that they think that the word world is a term that refers to each and every person in the world. That's not how they understood the word world, and we can see examples of their usage about that in the Gospels. We can see an example where he says, like, the whole world has gone after him, and of course they don't mean that each and every person has gone after him. So there's other examples we could give as well, but the word world, cosmos, means order, and it's not equivalent to saying every man. There are places where scripture uses the expression every man, and if he had said, I give this for the life of every man, they would have a different question, and then you would say, do they think they're part of every man? And if my answer was, I think that they say that they are, or I think that they're not, but they thought that they were, then we'd have to unpack that. But my point is that the word world has a different semantic range than you think it has, and that's a fundamental disconnect between our views. I don't know how to get past it in an easy way, but anyway, that's where I stand. You're
Okay,
currently
we can,
muted. All right.
we can move on.
Okay.
Hey, let me just give you
Go ahead.
let me give you another possibility here. Okay, just throw in a little eschatological debate here. When he's saying give us his flesh for the life of the world, if Jesus only saves 40% of the people, did he really die for the world? But if he saves like 70% of people, then he died for the world. Hashtag that post mill. Just giving you something to think about, and y'all can both beat up on that later.
I think that's a pretty relevant point, because like you can take the world in general, like without exceptions, but if it's like the vast majority of humanity that Christ didn't die for, that's quite an exception. Yeah, because I'm okay with I think I see your point.
But I want to say this. I think that your argument pressing verse 52, I thought it was really good. Like, had I been in the hot seat and you were hitting me with that, dude, I would have been struggling. How can this man give us his flesh to eat? It certainly seems that they understood that he was referring to them. It seems like that when you look at verse 52 and read that, in connection with 51. But again, I think I agree with the comment that popped up and what Turd and Fan was saying. If they understood it as that, they misunderstood it. But here's the thing as well. We're not denying the general offer of the gospel. And this can also just be looked at as a general offer of the gospel statement.
Yeah, I mean,
but I know that you're gonna press on that, and it's gonna get us back to where we almost agree, but we disagree a little bit,
So he's got this. The thing is, if it was just the gospel, it is the gospel, right? But it's not just the gospel, because it's the basis of the gospel, right? Because the future tense, he's already offering them the gospel right then and there on the spot. Like he's preaching it. Right? Here, I'll give you an example. Verse 40. All right. And this is the will of him that sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes on him may have everlasting life, and I'll raise him on the last day. Right. That's in the present tense right now. Right there at the time. But here he's gone to future tense. The bread that I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. So I think this is actually pointing to not just the gospel itself, but its actual foundation, the cross.
Right, and I'm fine with that, but with all of us understanding that the original audience had some sort of, number one, they're totally depraved sinners. I think we would all agree with that. Number two, they were being judicially hardened, like we see that clearly in the context. Is it possible that they could have misunderstood what Jesus was saying? And then in verse 52, it's like, oh, well, he's talking about us when Jesus really wasn't, in light of those two issues.
So they certainly misunderstood him. The question is, misunderstood him how, right? Like, because they were thinking cannibalism, right? Like, right. So that part is misunderstood. But it does seem odd to me to say, well, they misunderstood his word world, thinking that it included them when it actually didn't. That's really weird. But I mean, really weird things
I'm just
happen.
I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I got you.
I would want to study more if I was going to debate you on this text.
Understood. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. I mean, like I said, I'm happy to move on, unless either of you want to have the final word on this, which is fine with me. I
So
think I've said my part.
on the separating out the question of what world means, which we seem to be at a what's the right word? An impasse on that in terms of reaching the same understanding. The second part was how this statement, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? And the question is less about them thinking that he definitely will do it versus that how is this even possible? The question is more, how is this even possible? That's how I understand their question. They're thinking what he's saying just doesn't make sense. How can he give us his flesh to eat? And that's a problem for them along the same lines as this thing of, like he said, he came down from heaven. They're like, what is he talking about? We know his mom and dad. He didn't come down from heaven. What is he talking about? That's the nature of their comment here. The correct emphasis, as I hear it, is not so much how can he give it to us who are unbelievers, us who don't even like him, us who are just here for the food. The point is not how does this for us? The question, the emphasis is how is this even possible? Now, that if go ahead.
So shocker, I disagree. Shocking, but this is an irrelevant disagreement. But I think what they're saying is, in a moral sense, like how is it ethical to, or like how without violating the law is he talking about cannibalism?
I mean, I'm not 100% sure whether they specifically have in mind cannibalism, because I mean, when he goes on to, he does sort of double down on this very carnal metaphor, where he originally just said flesh, and then he says flesh and blood, verse 53. Could you scroll down just a little bit farther?
Sure.
And keep
55, he just starts hammering him. Yeah.
And then he said, this is the bread that came down from heaven, not like your fathers did eat manna and are dead. And then it says, when he said these things, this is a hard saying. So the question is, the people up to this point, they questioned, how is this possible? Maybe they mean, how is this kosher? But I think it's actually more like this just seems like an impossibility. Okay. Maybe, but then they have this, the disciples hear it, they say it's a hard saying, who can hear it? But then Jesus answered to them, verse 62, after he says, does this offend you? He says, what if you will see the Son of Man ascend up where he was before? Which to me, it ties us back more to the comment about coming down from heaven. And it's almost as if that's the primary source of offense, is this idea that he came down from heaven, which he had reiterated when he calls himself the manna and came down from heaven and so forth. That seems to be the thing, that seems to be what he's targeting as the main problem. And then his answer, it's not, it does clarify what he's saying. Verse 63 clarifies what he's saying and pushes you away from a carnal understanding of what he had just said previously. But it leaves open, it doesn't close the door on the idea that he came from heaven. In other words, his divinity, that offends them, and he doesn't back away from that at all. In fact, he says, you're going to see more proof of it when I ascend back up into heaven. That's how I'm taking his answer there. And then people walked away and they wouldn't believe him. Verse 66.
Okay.
That's where I'm coming from.
Right. Very good. Very good. Very good.
There are lots of chat questions, unless there's more on this topic.
No,
There's
no.
lots of chat questions. I don't know if you want to cherry pick some of them. There's way too many to fairly address all of them.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, if you guys want to hit questions, I mean, it's up to you. Actually, no. Before we do, so before we hit questions, Jerry, did you have other things that you wanted to chat about, discuss, ask about, anything?
No, I appreciate you asking that, but no, I didn't. I'm fine with hitting the chat and just seeing what they've asked.
Cool.
I didn't want to turn this into a two-on-one Twitchy and Turretin versus Dan debate, you know. So I kind of just let you guys battle it out a little bit, and I'll just throw in my little silly trial balloons.
We do battle all the time.
If it wasn't for just the passion with which Dan and I each have our own opinion, and therefore the kind of friction it would create, we could, just based on how many arguments we have and points of disagreement, I think we could have a channel that was specifically just, is limited atonement true? Dan and Turton Fan battle it out, and it would be able to, you could have a new episode every single day. I feel like that sometimes that could be the case. That said, all right, so I'm going to try my best to star some questions in the chat. And if you see other questions you want to grab, I'll let you sort of cherry pick from the already cherry picked starred questions or something like that, if you don't mind to do it that way. I'll try to keep identifying some. Let's see, and I'm trying to be fair about.
Here's one for you.
Is T-Fan saying people are punished for rejecting Christ versus punished for their sins? They're punished for their sins. One sin, for some people, is rejecting Christ, but not everybody explicitly rejects Christ, because not everybody explicitly hears about Christ. And so yeah, they die for they're punished for sin.
I feel like I should argue with you, but I actually agree.
Let's see.
We did it.
Let's see. And feel free to, I don't know how you want to handle picking the comment or the questions. He says we're still on track. We're still talking about that. There's a servant of Christ had an interesting set of comments that I'm trying to start together. Let's see. Sorry for the dead air to everyone.
There's a lot of questions, a lot of comments and stuff that we're just going through.
Don't worry, I have an ad for this beef tallow body butter. If your wife will love it, I don't know what it's for, but apparently the women do, and it's great. Go to snakecrusherproducts.online and use promo code Twitchy for 15% off. And Snake Crusher Products, by the way, Christian company, based off of Genesis 3:15. So please go check them out.
Awesome. That's cool. Okay. J Bubbles, the sacrifice of the Old Testament took away no one's sin. I agree. It did. I mean, it symbolized the taking away of sin, of course, but obviously, Christ's blood is the one that took away sin. Now, what the Old Testament sacrifices did was, like in the book of in Hebrews 9, it talks about how it was, the Old Testament sacrifice purified the flesh, but the New Testament sacrifices purify the conscience. And that ritual purity was important in the Jewish context in terms of staying within the camp, not getting kicked out, not getting stoned, or whatever the case might be. So in a public, within a nation of Israel context, yeah, in that sense, it provided that level of human forgiveness of sins. Now, if someone believed if they humbled themselves, if they repented of their sins while they were offering, going through the sacrifices. God was justifying them not because of the sacrifices, but because of their faith. And ultimately, they were justified by Christ's blood. Now, I think there's an interesting question of, well, what about in the meantime? Like what happened between, the time of Leviticus until the cross came? And some people look at the Romans chapter 3, the statement, like basically that God held it in forbearance or something like that until the cross. So I don't know whether that's the case. That's a tough question to ask. But in any case, your big picture argument, absolutely. It purified the flesh, not the conscience.
I, of course, can't disagree with that. That it didn't. John the Baptist is a Presbyterian.
All right, here we go. Look, there cannot be somebody that is more Baptist than John the Baptist. He was not a Presbyterian. He was a Baptist. It's in the name.
Have you seen some of the old paintings of him though? He had a little ladle in there with him. He would pour. Now, I actually read a book called William the Baptist where he says he was baptizing so many people that he would take an olive branch and he would dip it down and then he would sling it at them. So he would be sprinkling multiple people at a time. It really said that in the book.
Yeah. What was it? There's like some council in the Middle Ages that said basically you can baptize people in beer if you need to, but not wine.
Not wine?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's actually a good one to look up. All right.
Let's see. I'm like 90% of the way through reviewing the comments, and I have 17 starred ones there.
Oh my. Okay. You might start digging through those. Okay.
You might want to dig through some of those, and just if you see any that you want to take, you just promote them up into the discussion. Since we have about 5 minutes left, I'm sure we won't get to all 17 out of hundreds that are here. And
well, I'll just take it from the top. Okay, so Bubbles, hey, I was getting confused on unlimited atonement side. So who is paying for the sins of unbelievers? Is it Jesus or is it themselves? Interesting question. So ultimately the unbelievers. So, oh gosh, this is not a 5-minute question, but okay, I'll see if I can explain it. Okay, we talked about commercial transactions. So the idea in scripture, the word that's used is imputation. And the way it works is this. Let's say we go to a restaurant together and, Jerry picks up the check, right? So he can pick up the check and pay off the waitress. And if the waitress says, I'm going to go impute this to your account, we're going to be like, all three of us going to be like, we don't care. That's your bookkeeping. That's your business, right? Now, let's say the bill between the three of us is $500 because we all ate steak and lobster and whatever, right? And so if Jerry pays with a 20 and the waitress says, I'm going to count this as your payment, then that imputation is really interesting because she's forgiving our debt. So it's closer to that second analogy, but we're still not there yet. Right? So now the third analogy is, what if we dine and dash, right? At that point, we've committed a crime. And so let's say my brother couldn't serve the jail time for me. And if, because my brother and I look somewhat similar, my brother goes to jail, they throw him in jail for it, it doesn't matter. Even if he serves let's say it's a year in jail. If they catch me afterwards and figure it out, just the fact that he spent a year in jail doesn't make any difference. I'm still going to have to go serve a year in jail because you can't pay for another's sins. So you can Zelle each other cash, you can Venmo or Cash App each other cash, but you can't Venmo and Cash App each other guilt. I think what happens in the church is like we're so used to God justifying sinners and counting Christ's death as our death that we kind of almost like think it's due or automatic or like something to be taken for granted when it's a tremendous, tremendous act of mercy But because it's an act of mercy, that God counts Christ's death as my death, then he can affix whatever conditions he wants. And the condition he fixed is faith. He requires faith before he's going to impute our faith as righteousness. So the payment as such is only, Christ's death is only counted as my payment after faith. So, and if someone doesn't believe, then it's never imputed to them.
I would love to debate this particular point, because I think it gets to the question of whether it's paid for them or just paid to God. If it's just a matter of, in other words, if it's paid to God and then he can arrange the bookkeeping however he wants, then it's not yet paid for me until I believe, let's say, if that's the model of the scenario you've described. And
Sure.
exploring that more, I would love to do another time. But the problem is, I'm like, I could write a check now for like so many episodes that we could cash. I'm gonna, Jerry, feel free to jump in at any point. I'm just going to try to go quickly through some of these comments. This one is from I don't know which channel he was commenting. I just know it wasn't specifically mine. Servant of Christ. The Solano translation of the sentences. He offered is the following. He offered himself on the altar of the cross, not to the devil, but to the triune God, and he did so for all with regard to the sufficiency of the price, but only for the elect with regard to its efficacy, because he brought about salvation only for the predestined. So that's a professional translation of that, which is not significantly different from your
ChatGPT.
machine translation through ChatGPT. What's up, my peeps?
Hey.
I don't know the correct response. There's this kind of complaint from Molina, of all people. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. I know it's a common name. It says, I know Turton Fan and Dan are good friends, and that's nice and all, but Dan seems counterproductive to an otherwise good debate review by two really good, and I suppose he means good looking, just kidding, Calvinist apologists. But I appreciate the kind comment that Jerry and I are good Calvinist apologists. But you have to realize, like, one of the benefits of having one of the people who was in the debate in the review is you get clarification about the debate. Yeah, we could be here just taking pot shots in sort of an after debate echo chamber, like I did yesterday. I had a chance to take pot shots at the opening argument from Dr. Farris, but that's not. We can still do that on another occasion if we needed to, if something people find that helpful. But I think it actually, Dan, it's not like we just brought in some random non-Calvinist to be part of the conversation. In this case, he's a subject matter expert. He was there. That was one of the questions that came up, was like, how did people react in the room to the speeches? Were they active? We could barely hear any audience participation. Was everyone like quiet, like in church, or were people like shouting things out and participating?
The audience was amazing. So the room was a packed house, and there was an overflow room in the back with, I think it was like maybe some of the youth group, but just a bunch of people. Like, so it was just absolutely full. Everyone was so kind, so generous, and everything like that. Big thanks to Jeremiah's wife. She gave me a gift, which I was able to give to my wife, and she was very grateful because I had to step away from the family to do this. And then in terms of the audience, I mean, for the most part, every once in a while, like for the jokes, they would laugh, but they didn't interrupt the speakers and anything like that. The questions were on point. I mean, I don't know, like, what more could somebody ask for an audience? I mean, it was amazing.
Rogue Calvinist asks this question: how does Jesus explain what he really meant to the disciples after he grossed everyone out on purpose? I don't know. This may have been asked before we got to it, but I felt like we kind of answered that a little bit. But I appreciate Rogue Calvinist tuning in for us and being here. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that response.
Yeah. We've done episodes on John 6, so I just refer people to some of the previous works that we've done on the topic.
I think arguing this point would just expand what we've already discussed for quite a while, but Synagogue has some ideas about the word world. Other people have had similar arguments. So refer to people's chats. Go to all 3 channels and look at all the chats. I don't remember which one Synagogue was in, but there's questions there. The Saravian says that this argument is more about divine intentions in offering than extent. Well, I think sometimes it's like both of those things. It's the intent, the extent of the intent, or something like that. But
let me say a bit and then ask a question. So, I mean, I think 4-point Calvinists would just take those passages saying like, the intention passages as one of the 2 wills of God. It's not like God's will of predestination, but it's not a secret will, but his revealed will, or something like that. And what it means is like God would prefer you to be saved, or requires you to believe and be saved, or something like that. So, in other words, like the argument that's sometimes provided is, well, if Jesus wanted to save people and he didn't, he failed. It seems to me there's at least a immediate position in between failure, which would, even from a Calvinist standpoint, which would just say that it's part of his revealed will rather than a secret will.
It's good to have an option where God failing is not one of the positions that we're putting on the table. That said, I've hit my own personal time limit, and I know Jerry also has to get up early tomorrow. Yeah. So if there's no opposition to the idea, any last words from anyone? And if hearing none, I'll just hit the end stream button, but which will play a brief outro that's targeted specifically for my channel. But the main message of that outro is like and subscribe. So whichever channel you happen to be watching on this, if you're not already a subscriber, make sure to like and subscribe. Any other?
Yeah, I think that if you're on Dan's channel, you should like and subscribe Twitchy and Turd and Fan, and if you're on Turd and Fans, you should subscribe to Twitchy and Dan's, and vice versa, all the way around. We're trying to grow and expand here. Help the algos. Hey, Dr. Farris just popped up in the chat.
Oh, nice. It's good to see him here.
Yeah, good to have you here, Dr. Farris. I'd love to have you on the channel sometime and talk to you a little bit more about this stuff. And I just want to say I'm grateful that you guys allowed me to review this with y'all. Hopefully I, added in some good stuff here and there. I really enjoyed what you guys had to say, as always, and look forward to doing more work with you in the future.
Thanks.
Sure.
Likewise.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the conversation. And yeah, I hope that we can have more of these and get to, it'd be a lot of fun. Let's do it.
All right. God be with you all.
God be with you.
Live long and prosper.